Y'all want to call me on three-way?
One sec, Jazz.
Mm-hmm.
I think he got a Jazz.
Sweet.
Okay, you on. It says we live on Facebook right now, though. Okay. Okay, everybody, we are live. Sorry for that. I'm gonna troubleshoot that in the background so we don't run into that again next week.
Dr. Key, you're muted.
You're muted.
I think I can unmute him. I can no longer unmute.
All right, can you guys hear me now? All right, so welcome everyone to the Flint Public Health Youth Academy, our third talk show from a youth perspective. Today we're talking about minding your mental. We're talking about mental health, and we're going to talk to you with some dynamic young people who are going to talk about mental health and living, first of all, as a young person in Flint through the Flint Water Crisis. That's enough to make you feel like you have, mental health issues. And then on top of that, COVID-19, and then this revolution around racism. So we have some dynamic young people today. We have Cole Mays, just kind of wave your hand when I call your name. We have Cruz Duhart. We have Devontae Williams, Everett Graham, Christian Mays, Selena's in the house. We have Everett Graham, who's one of our hosts, as well as Kayla Shannon and Asia Donald. And we also have Monisha Summers, Khalil Calvin, and Jasmine Hall, all on the line. So I am Dr. Kent Key. I am the founder and director of the Flint Public Health Youth Academy, and we are about to have a wonderful conversation. So with that, I will turn it over to our co-host. And I believe first up is Everett.
Hi, everybody. I'm super happy to be here with all of you today. As Dr. Key said, I am one of the co-hosts for this show, and I'm going to jump straight into it. So our first question is, what is mental health? What do you guys think mental health is? You see it in the media, you see it on TV. Like, what is mental health, though? Like, let's really get into it. Let's see. Who do we have first? I see Kayla's hand.
So I think mental health can be defined in several different ways, but as far as like the surface level definition of mental health, it's I mean, obviously the health of your mental. So whether that be um, how often you spend time taking care of yourself outside of, you know, caring for relationships, in the same way that we spend time making sure that we're physically healthy by eating and all of those things. In the same way, we make sure to maintain relationships by speaking to our friends and hanging out with them and all of those things. I think mental health then is all of the activities that go into assuring that we are okay by ourselves, and that when you get alone, that you still feel comfortable and you still feel safe alone.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Do we have anybody else who would like to speak on this first question? Let's see.
Christian's hand is up.
Yes, Christian.
So Kayla did really well explaining it, but there's actually, it's kind of difficult because it's a wide spectrum of different things that are involved with mental health. So I see mental health as like how you react to things, basically, and how the stimulus around you makes you react to things, how people around you react to things, just generally how, you don't physically do things, how you feel over time. It's, it's a lot of different things. So.
Yeah, you both are completely right. Mental health is a wide spectrum of things. It's not just one thing. You can't really group it into one small group. It's like a huge like situation. So if I don't see any more hands, I'm gonna move on to our next question, which is, what was your introduction to mental health? Who taught you about it? Like, where did you guys learn about mental health? Did you learn about it in school? Did your parents bring it up to you? Like, where did you learn about it? I see Asia's hand.
Personally, I love this question because I wasn't really introduced to my mental health until about junior year of high school, and it was crazy because um, the summer before junior year, my aunt died, and when I went to school, I wasn't really feeling super well. I was just out of it, and a lot of my friends were like, they were asking me like, "Are you okay? Is like everything okay when you leave school? Is like, are you doing all right?" And I was like, no, and I have no clue how to fix it. So a lot of my first introduction to mental health was like my friends at school telling me like, hey, you need to like talk about what's going on at home. You need to get some type of help so that you don't feel like everything is worked up and pushed against you.
Yeah, I agree. Mine was sort of similar. We had a bunch of losses in our family back to back, and for me personally, I just didn't know how to like cope with it, how to feel. So like, it was hard to deal with that when nobody tells you, hey, you might feel this way sometimes, and this is why. But moving on to the next person, I think let me see. I see Cruz's hand.
Yeah, I have a very similar experience to Asia in case that I wasn't really exposed to mental health until like my freshman year of high school, and I learned it in a health class. But by that point, I had gone through a lot of things without understanding good ways to deal with them, and so I had pushed things back and not really focused on them in the way that I should have. And so after that class, I was able to sort of adjust a little bit, but that would have made so much more of a difference if I knew these things sooner. And yeah, but when it comes to just like knowing about it, it took me a while to fully get a good idea of it, because it's not necessarily expressed frequently in your face or anything.
Everett, Selena's hand is up.
Okay, go ahead, Selena.
I learned about mental health when I was going through a hard period in my life, and I noticed that my mental was going downhill. So I started to pray and meditate. I just wanted to make sure my mind was straight. And yeah.
Yeah, so like everybody mentioned, all of our responses are kind of general,
And before
but yeah, it's not really.
before you transition, I think Amir's hand is up. I know you can't see him from your phone, but Amir's hand is up as well.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
for me, mental health really started, like my grandparents, they really like established that with me. They were like, from like day one, it's okay to express your feelings and how you feel about stuff. So it basically just made the foundation for me to be like open with everything and, actually express my emotions out.
Yeah, it's honestly like really weird because like so one day you'll just be chilling and the next day you're like down in the dumps feeling sad and then you don't really know who to turn to, who to talk to because it's like not something you're taught. Like you see people on TV saying they're depressed or people talking about being depressed, but then you're like, what does that mean? How does that feel? You don't really get it until you're like in that position. Um, so with that being said, were there any more hands up? I couldn't see. All right, so I'm gonna take that as a no.
No,
Moving on
I
to the
think
next
Monisha's
question.
hand is ready.
Okay,
Who?
Dr.
go
Summer.
ahead, Monisha.
Monisha Summers, did you have your hand up? Maybe her computer's stuck.
I think she's talking, but it's
Yeah, we can't
not
hear
working.
you. Okay, go ahead, Everett, and we'll come back to Dr. Summers once we get the audio right. Go ahead for the next question.
Cool.
Okay, our next question is it important to have a dialogue about mental health? Why or why not? So that kind of ties into our last question. Like we all kind of generally agree that we didn't talk about it, but do you guys think that it's really important to talk about it? I see Kayla and Cole. So Kayla go first and then Cole.
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to have these conversations because I think part of the reason that people find mental health to be such an uncomfortable and taboo topic is because they don't see it frequently show up in normal conversation. I think it is normal and considered polite, to say, how are you? And then say, okay, or I'm good, or whatever the case may be. And I think what would be more genuine and should become more common is for us to be okay with admitting that we're not okay. Because I think when that becomes commonplace, when it becomes commonplace for people to be honest about how they're feeling and what they're thinking, then mental health will become a conversation that is more comfortable to have earlier on in life.
Thank you, Kayla. Go ahead, Cole.
I feel like it is important to openly talk about mental health because it's if you're the one thing that controls you, which is your brain, has problems, then everything else is just going to go downhill. But at the same time, it's kind of difficult to talk about it because if you were to talk about it to some, like, let's say you have it like as a conversation starter, they're going to look at you different. And it's kind of difficult to actually talk about it to people that you don't always trust because sometimes they'll look at you different. They'll think that you're slower for some reason. Not everyone's like that, but you don't know that. It's kind of like another thing that fits with anxiety. Like you don't really want to talk about it because there is a slight chance that they might just look at you differently for a very long time. But it really is important to talk about mental health.
Great. I see Christian's hand up, then Jasmine.
Right. There's also, it's very important to talk in a group about it because there's other perspectives that aren't similar to yours that you can blend into your perspective. You can learn more about it. You can understand it more, and have other people that don't quite understand it yet, or do understand it but don't really want to express it. They can, express it the right way and get help the right way. It'll help other people as along with you talking about it. But right now, it's not much of a custom thing, like Kayla said. It's harder to talk about these topics. It's harder to bring them up, which it shouldn't be. It's our health. So.
Yeah, and like you're saying, kind of like we all have mental health. We talked about that in the kind of pre-discussion, but we all have mental health, whether we're talking about like, a mental disorder, whether we're talking about good mental health, but it's something that we're all experiencing. We all have our minds. And then also in people of color, it sometimes shows up in different ways. Like maybe my depression looks like I'm not eating or I'm not sleeping versus, I'm feeling hopeless or down all the time. Like it shows up in different ways. And if I'm talking to Kayla, and I hear her talking about it, I could tell like, oh, she's been saying she hasn't had an appetite for like several weeks. Like maybe I should check on her. Maybe I should call her. And honestly, like as a society, we should be thriving. I think that's so. Yes, it's important because we're far from thriving. That's my little 2 cents as a mental health epi.
Yeah, hearing from everybody, we all kind of have like another general idea that it is important to talk about mental health. Like me personally, I remember one of my first talks about mental health was with my brother, and like I honestly didn't know that it was something that had a label on it. Like when he brought it up, I'm just like, oh, so this is like thing that everybody feels. It's not just me. So like you kind of feel left out until you have that first conversation. Like, hey, sometimes you feel like this, or sometimes you act the way you do because of this, and it's not it doesn't make you irregular. It just makes you. So I feel like it's really important that we start talking about it and normalize talking about mental health. I see Christian's hand again.
Also, Devontae.
Yeah, I just like to add on to that. It takes so much at the current day. For some reason, it takes so much strength to be the one to say, hey, I'm not okay. And if you do that, first of all, you're getting help yourself, but it'll also inspire others to do the same thing. They go, maybe I'm not okay. Maybe I won't, suppress it. If you break your leg, like in physical health, you're not going to walk around on that limpy leg saying it's broken and saying, yeah, it's okay. So it's just something that has to be more accustomed, more widespread.
Devontae?
I agree with Christian. Mental health is extremely important. In schools, you see the urge and the support of physical health in sports and many clubs and sports, but you don't really see the urge to like get your mental body in shape. You only see, get your physical body in shape, and that's of course important too. But it's also important to get some mental stability right. So yeah.
Yeah, Devontae, you're completely right. Like it's often talked about in school. I know at a lot of schools they have little sections in time where they talk about eating healthy and they talk about working out for an hour of like activity a day. But you don't hear that for mental health. You don't hear, hey, sometimes when you're feeling stressed out, you just need to take a break. You don't need to keep pushing yourself through writing this 12-page paper. Like sometimes you need to take a break. So I feel like it's something that should be implemented in just everyday activity.
And I believe Selena
So I don't think
grazed. Selena?
Go ahead.
We should mostly push to talk about mental health inside of households because a lot of parents think that children, I guess, don't have feelings or they're not supposed to feel depressed and stuff. So mostly when a child tells their parent, hey mom, I'm depressed, then they'll quickly say, what are you depressed about? or you have nothing to be depressed about. You're not grown. So that should definitely be changed.
Thank you. And then Everett, I don't know if you can see Devontae's hand is back up.
Go ahead, Devontae.
It's going to be real quick. I completely agree with Selena because I see this a lot amongst my peers. It's like they feel depressed and they are scared to go to their parents because their parents will shut them down because, the parents, provides for them financially. But as as a parent, in my opinion, you should try to provide for your child emotionally as well, because that is just as important. And I know it's hard for you to do that, but at least find help to help your child.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off the both of you, like that's one of the hardest parts about talking about mental health is because a lot of people don't feel comfortable with talking to their parents about it, or the response that they get from the parents when they tell them, "Oh, I'm depressed," or "Oh, I have anxiety." The parents don't believe them, or they don't see that, and I feel like that's one of the biggest like barriers in the way of kids being comfortable with talking about their mental health. Kinda another part of this conversation is counseling. I wanted to like ask, how do you guys feel about counseling? Because not counseling as like the sort of going to a therapist and sitting in a room paying somebody to listen to you, but like counseling as in talking to your parents, talking to your friends. Like, who do you go to when you feel depressed? Like, what do you do to like calm yourself down, bring yourself back down to reality? Like, what is your counseling?
So I saw Asia, Cruz, and Selena, and then Christian.
My personal opinion on counseling is that it is very important, especially in a time like this, especially in Flint with all the stuff that's going on. But I find it very important that everyone has somebody that they can go to. So as the eldest sister, I make sure that I'm like sort of a counselor for my younger siblings. And whenever I'm home or whenever they have any issues, I tell them like, hey, just give me a call. I'm here for you. We can sit and talk about anything. I won't tell mom. I won't tell dad. I won't tell any of our other siblings. It's all confidential unless I need to get you some help.
I think I was up next. I totally agree with Asia. For me, nothing feels better, honestly, than speaking into someone who kind of understands me to a degree. And so it's really important to find that person for you, the person that you can, confide in and let them know how you're feeling, and they won't judge you for it. I think that's kind of what was hinted at before, is that not everyone can be that person for you. And so what's important is trying to be that person for other people as much as you can be, because it's also important to understand that your mental health is, sacred as well. And you don't want to do too much to where they start to drain you. But that being said, it's still, you want to be open arms to as many people as you can be and help support as much as you can. And you need to find that person for you. Whenever I'm feeling sad or lonely or something like that, I have a couple of people that I can go reach out to, and they'll help make me feel better. And it's important to have that understanding person for you. And like Everett said, it doesn't have to be a professional counselor. That could be literally your best friend or a mentor of yours.
Okay, Selena, then Christian.
Well, personally, me being an only child, I don't have siblings to talk to. So I would not go to my mother because she'll shut me down. I don't really go to my friends because every time I mention something, they don't understand. Then you'll get more frustrated completely, like saying the same thing 3 or 4 times for them to get it, because they can't relate. So honestly, I just listen to music, I guess. Yeah, I just listen to music. I just deal with stuff on my own. After a while, you'll learn how to just talk to yourself, I guess.
Christian, then Monisha.
I agree with everybody here, 110% on it. It is extremely important to find your way of counseling or coping with it. I'm lucky enough to have 2 brothers that'll listen. I'm super lucky to have 2 parents that'll listen to me. Super lucky to have my girlfriend who listens to me. but my friends group is the one I'm kind of packing on. And it's very important, like Chris said, don't wear yourself out over it, but do as much as you can, because sometimes I get worn out by trying to help friends because I'm trying to, take everyone in my arms. It just kind of messes you up after a little bit. There's a limit, and you'll figure out that limit as well. But, it's a lot of work, but it's good work that you'll know. It's just very important to have a way of account.
You're muted. Still can't hear you, Dr. Summers. Try to unmute one more time. Still can't hear you. You can put your comment in the chat and I'll read it for you. Okay.
All right. Well,
Sorry, you got Jasmine right up there, and then we'll switch over to Kayla, and then she can transition.
So several things that folks have said have really resonated about having just someone to talk to, whether that's a professional or it's someone that you trust. And then Selena's comment made me think about just the faith kind of community and having I'm Christian, so having a pastor that I can call or talk to, or even just that prayer is a kind of an outlet in a way for counseling. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I completely agree with you all. Selena said something that really resonated with me. Like, I do have a brother, but that's not my blood brother, and I do have step siblings. But like growing up, it was mainly just me and my mom. So it's kind of hard dealing with things, and you can't really go talk to my mom because I didn't want to stress her out because it was just her. So it was kind of hard. But like along the way, I meet people, I make friends who I can go and talk to and be like, "Hey, I'm not doing too well. Like, what do I do?" And like that's a big thing. Like people, the biggest thing with mental health is like when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling sad, you don't know what to do. So having somebody you can go to and be like, hey, I need help, or I need this, or I need that, it's like the biggest thing, because even if they can't help you, talking to people brings like joy to the situation, like makes the situation better. So yeah.
So thanks for that, Everett. I'm going to transition to Kayla. And Kayla, if you can read Dr. Summers' comment before you start with your segment. Thank you.
absolutely. So Dr. Summers said she was going to say she agrees with Selena because sometimes people get tired of hearing your story. And so mostly she prays about it. And I definitely thank you for your contribution. And I definitely agree with that. As a Christian also, I think there's power in prayer. And I personally believe that God is our ultimate counselor. And so thank you for that comment. And so moving on, we're going to kind of transition into another segment of this conversation and speaking about the stigmas that are associated with mental health and conversations about mental health. And so our first question is, do you think mental health is weird or uncomfortable to talk about? So I see Asia's hand. Will go with you first, and then Christian, I see your hand.
On a personal level, no, I don't think that it's weird or uncomfortable to talk about, but depending on who I'm talking to, it gets a little bit weird because like everyone else is saying, like when it comes to talking to your parents, there's some things that you just don't want to tell them or you feel like you can't tell them. So it kind of, you have to skip around in your stories and it gets weird to talk about the stories like that. But mostly when I'm talking to like my siblings and my friends and stuff, it's like a normal conversation. It's just a part of our day, like our routine of how to talk to each other.
Christian, go ahead, and then Cole.
I agree entirely with Asia. It's me personally, I don't think it is. I think it's perfectly acceptable, and it's just health. It's very important. But when you go to actually start talking about it, it's like kind of peer pressure in you. You don't want to talk about it. It's kind of just, it's hard to bring it up and talk as well. It's always something that you kind of itch around the side so you can really break through the fence to talk about.
Yeah, mental health can definitely be an icebreaker of a conversation. I actually believe that mental health is oftentimes the conversation that can transition a relationship from an associate to a friendship, because you gain a deeper connection by talking to somebody about the things that they can't see looking at you. Learning someone's story, learning their history, learning what affects them. So yeah, I absolutely understand why it may be hard, but also agree that it's very important. So Cole, I saw your hand, and then Everett after him. You can go ahead.
No, you can go a second. You can go for, you can go before me.
All right, go ahead, Everett.
Yeah, I just want to say I do believe that it's a weird conversation, but I also do agree with Asia. It depends on who you're talking to, because like she said, you can't always go to your parents, especially in like the situations I had. I couldn't always go to my mom and feel like I was doing her, like it didn't feel like I was doing her a favor, like adding something else to her plate, which is also a problem in itself. Like, but yeah, I think it is weird to talk about. It's not something that you just go up to a random person and say, "Hey, I'm depressed," or "Hey, I have anxiety." Like, yeah.
Go ahead, Cole.
I agree with what Everett said. How it's like you don't really want to add something on their plate if you don't really know how many problems they have at the moment or something like that. They could. I do think it's like a little bit difficult to talk about mental health, although I feel like it should be. It should just be a little bit easier, but at the same time, there are reasons for it to be so difficult because it's just like. Oh, sorry for. Okay, sorry, dog's barking. But it is kind of hard to actually say it because there's like one thing, if you say something wrong, they'll try to like. I think I already mentioned this before. I think I'm just gonna stop.
No, Cole, you definitely were making valuable remarks that it can be uncomfortable and sometimes difficult to have these conversations. And I think it's very easy for us to feel as if we are a burden to others. But I think it's also very important for us to remember that the reason we have these support systems that we have is so that they can support. And so if we don't give our support systems and those that love us the opportunity to support us, and we suffer in silence, so to speak, then they never actually have the opportunity to support us in the way after that.
So Kayla, I do see Devontae and Selena have their hand on through the system up. So
Okay, so Cruz, you go ahead first, and then I'll come to Selena and Devontae.
Yeah, personally, it can be uncomfortable for me sometimes. I'm usually the person who's being talked to and not the talker in a lot of these scenarios. And so it does feel kind of weird having these conversations and being vulnerable. I mean, that's not easy. Most of the time that when you're talking about these things, it's something that's like either deeply, something that pertains to you, or it's something that, it can't just necessarily see based off of you physically sometimes. And so that can be a real vulnerable position to put yourself in. So it can be uncomfortable. But usually by the end of it, I feel relieved to some degree, whether it's like what's been said before, that people feel similar ways that I do. And so I'm not, too different when it comes to going through struggles and things like that. But it's also this feeling that is a person I can trust sometimes. And so I feel okay with them having that information. It's like a burden being lifted off of me. And to what Selena was saying before, I don't think there's any issue with it sometimes being by yourself. Everyone copes differently. And if you're able to, listen to some music and get some stress out, I think that's cool. And for whatever it is, you should be able to do it to your heart's content.
Yes, thank you for that. We'll have Jasmine, and then after Jasmine, we'll have Selena.
So when you ask like, is it weird or uncomfortable? I would say like yes and no, because there are some aspects like, if we're dealing with a little bit of anxiety or a little bit of depression, Like now we talk about it, we just say, you know, it's Tuesday, I'm feeling anxious. But then when it's more like serious stuff, and honestly the things that we might need the most support on, we might feel a little more reluctant to talk about it. Like I know this month is like Suicide Awareness Month, and if we're feeling suicidal, it's like, oh, do I talk about it? Because then they're gonna think I'm gonna do something if I'm not gonna do nothing, you know. And it's like that's when you should really talk to someone. Or like if you're struggling with any type of substances, it's like that might be the time, but then it's like that's where the real stigma comes in. Also in certain fields, like I know in the medical field, it's like you can't be a doctor and say you're struggling, like what? And that I see it starting to change. Like I see it starting to change across the board, especially with young people. So it's becoming less weird, hopefully.
Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, that it's become in some ways easier to just say, oh, I'm depressed. Like you hear people say it flippantly, or, oh, I have OCD, and all of these different mental disorders and disabilities that are actually very serious that people kind of throw around flippantly. So then it becomes more difficult to know and truly understand when someone is being serious and actually needs help, because we use these words as if they're not as serious as they truly are. So up next we have Selena.
Well, everybody's different. So when people ask me how am I doing, I would honestly say, well, I'm not doing so well, but I'll be okay, or something like that. Or it depends on who it is and what kind of state I'm in, because sometimes, you know, when you're really in a bad mood and people ask you, are you okay? And you're not okay, you're going to open up because you'd be so happy that somebody finally asks you, you know, are you okay? Or sometimes, I'm sure we all had those moments when somebody asks you, are you okay? And you might start crying because you're not okay. So I feel like it's okay to open up to people, but some people, everybody don't need to know your business because people will use that against you.
Yes, it's absolutely important to be careful about who you bring this information to. It's definitely not for everyone to know. So up next we have Devonte, and then Amir, I saw you raise your hand, so we'll come over to you next.
I love talking about mental health. If anybody asks me about it, I would immediately go like right in. I would ask them how they're feeling, and I just love talking about these types of things because like it's so rare. It's extremely rare. It's so rare that it's sad because like people are not willing to open up, and it's like there are cliche conversations happening all the time, and like when every blue moon when I get that conversation, I always thank them because it's really rare. And it's therapeutic for me to hear someone's story. I had a conversation like that, a deep, long conversation like that last night with someone in my past. And it was really therapeutic. It was really great. I should have been asleep, but like it was really awesome. So I just love talking about mental health. And it's really therapeutic, and it's not comfortable for me. I will spoil it. Now, if it's a stranger or something, I won't, tell all of my address and stuff like that. But I would say just enough that he would get it. I mean, they would get it, and they'll get the gist of it. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Devonte, for your expertise and the way you said it. It's very great. Amir, I see you next.
Yep. So off of Jasmine's point, it was like that. Also, we see that in like other multiple fields like music. Like nowadays, like basically you just hear about people basically flat out just saying everything, using all these substances and all that type of stuff, and it's like. And like especially these past couple of years, you had a lot of rappers like be lost to, like drug abuse and all other type of stuff. So it's really good to be vocal about it and actually like vocalize and actually get the help that they need, that like you need, and just for everyone to get the help that they need.
So Kayla, I want to just add into this really quick. It also it's cultural, it's regional, and it also has a lot to do with your family. like how you're raised, right? But I want to just talk about the regional piece because we might get into some of the more personal things. But for example, like I travel across the country speaking, doing public health presentations, etc. And you know, like on the East Coast and maybe like in the South, you mention mental health, and people, you know, it's more apprehension to talk about it because you don't want people to think that you're, you know, something's wrong with you, because nothing is wrong with you if you're trying to take care of your mental health. Like I think Christian gave a good example. Like if your leg is broke, you're gonna go take care of your leg and you're not looked at weird because you take care of your leg. So if you have things that are stressing you out or that are depressing you, then it makes sense to go and take care of that, right? Because our mental health should not be separated from our physical health, our oral health, all of that makes up our total health, right? But I notice like when I'm on the West Coast, I have friends there, they're like, okay, yeah, we're gonna go and grab lunch. I gotta go to yoga, then I have to go see my therapist. Like, it's just so commonly, it's more accepted in certain regions of the country than it is in others. And if you don't have a therapist and you're like your therapist, they're like, yeah, don't you have one? And then they looking at you like something's wrong with you, you know, if you don't have one. So I think it just has a lot to do with the combination of things. One, how you were raised, how you were taught to look at it. Secondly, the culture by which you come from. And then thirdly, almost the region of the country in which you were in, because in some parts of the country, it's a lot more acceptable to have those conversations.
I think that's very true. And speaking of the different levels that affect how willing or unwilling you are to speak about mental health, then our next question is, would you agree that mental health is a forgotten conversation among minority communities? And if you do, why do you think mental health is often forgotten? So Cole, I saw your hand pop up quickly.
Then I'm sorry, you also have Selena and Devontae's hand, their hand has been up too.
All right.
I don't think that, like, when it comes to the conversations, I think that it's rather, instead of being ignored and kind of just forgotten, I think it's just avoided. Because people, you know how, like, when it comes to songs, they kind of want to show off how much they have, how much they can. But in between that, you never really hear, hey, I have this problem, because I guess it shows offensiveness and defense, and like offense to your defense. It's kind of like a fickle thing, because people don't really want to talk about it because they don't know what they can do with that information that you just told them. Like when it comes to, like, let's say big rappers and stuff like that, if someone told them, like, oh my God, he has this, people are gonna look at him differently, and it's kind of fickle with the.
That's a good point.
Very good point, Cole. So we're gonna go to Devontae next, and then Asia, I saw you raise your hand.
Can you please repeat the question so I can get it?
Yes, I can repeat it. The question was, would you agree that mental health is a forgotten conversation among minority communities? And if you do, why do you think mental health is often forgotten?
Is it really forgotten? I don't think it's forgotten. I think it's uncomfortable to talk about. I know there are many families and homes that are broken. I'm talking about broken. I'm talking about dad is in jail, mom is on drugs. I'm not talking about all families. I'm just talking about specific families and homes. And the families are broken. And a child and children, well, specific children don't always have that love. And where love comes from, it comes from a good place of mental stability. It comes from mental stability. That's what love comes from. And when you don't have that, it's like, I'm not exposed to it. So I'm going to act this way. It's not forgotten, but it's extreme. It's not forgotten, but it's just not there. It's not there. So that's what I think part of the issue is.
Thank you, Devontae. I think you make a great point. That part of it, when we talk about the difference between communities, also goes into family structures, as Dr. Key was saying. So, Asia, you had your hand up next.
I agree with everyone else. I don't feel like it's forgotten. I feel like it's more of a like dismissed topic, especially in minority communities, because I feel like personally, in a way, the system is turned against us. So it's like to make us not be able to get out. And having a mental stability is your way out of whatever system they have turned against you. They find ways to break your home. They find ways to give you the lack of a good school experience. It all comes down to what the position you're put in from the time you're born and how the people around you allow you to react. If your family has so much of a stressful system and there's so much working against them, then mental health conversations are going to get dismissed because your family has to live paycheck to paycheck and mom's not at home, dad's doing work, and there's a lot going on.
I would absolutely agree with that. Do we have anyone else who would like to touch on that question?
I'll go really quick because I appreciate all of the students chiming in about how they think it is a avoided conversation and not lost, because I do think it is an active and conscious decision on many of our parts, especially our parents and older adults in our lives, to not have the conversation. And some of them is more of a, change the subject, we're not going to talk about it. But I think for other adults, particularly like in my life, I don't even think they understand that they're pushing this conversation away. In a funny instance, there's like a Twitter thread where everybody is chiming in on like stuff their parents did in their childhood. And we're like laughing about all of these different things, like when your mom comes home from work and she like instantly starts yelling and you sit there like, or the dishes not being, like just little stuff like that we're all laughing at. And we're not even realizing like, that's real toxic. Like that is not how it's supposed to go. Our parents are supposed to be conscious about their mental state and how they're affected their children. And one thing, when I was growing up, I didn't cry when my mom would whoop me, okay? I don't know why I was like this, but I was very young when I was like, she is whooping me because she's upset at what I did. So I'm not gonna give her the satisfaction of crying. I'm gonna work that out with my therapist, but I just was like, I'm not about to, about see me crying. And so I know that I was right because my mom started to use other methods of, punishing me. Like, you can't go outside, I'm gonna take your cell phone, whatever, stuff like that. But it's like at the foundation, when Dr. Key was talking about how you were raised, it wasn't necessarily abuse, but if I did something wrong and you're gonna whoop me for it, I'm not understanding the actual action. I just know that next time I'm gonna make sure that you don't see me doing whatever that is. We didn't have a conversation about whatever I did that you think is wrong. Or the famous because I said so. Like why we can't do this, Mom? Because I said so. Or this is grown folks' business or something like that. When really we grow up without the conversations and experience we need to be functioning adults ourselves, because that is how we were raised. And then on the other side of when you guys said mental health is what is the word you use? Weird. Somebody said that, I'm not going to tell strangers certain things, and just being an adult and like going to happy hour and stuff. Some people will go to the bar and tell strangers things they have not told their best friends, their spouse, their loved ones, just because it's certain, you feel like you can't tell those people. And I do think even if you don't have a professional or formal idea of therapy, some stuff you do need to say out loud. It can't just be you, because even though you probably can work yourself back to where you need to be, it takes you a lot longer to figure it out when it's just you. Like me, for example, when started school 3 weeks ago, and I'm up to 4 a.m. doing stuff, and I'm just like going through the motions. If I didn't talk to somebody about that, it will take me a lot longer to realize this is actually hindering my ability to do well, as opposed to I'm just venting to a friend and like, maybe you should talk to somebody about that, because you need a certain amount of hours of sleep. So while you know, music is therapy and stuff like that, you do need to speak stuff out loud so you can actually think about what is going on and the progress you need to make.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. I think you made several really good points. So at this point, we're going to, if I don't see any other hands, which I don't, we're going to transition over to Asia.
Okay, so my section of the talk show, I would say, is more about resources. So my first question, since we pretty much touched over like what, how do we cope with our feelings? Who do we go to talk to? How do you believe that school systems and parents can better support youth with their struggling mental health? Amir, and then Christian.
So what my former high school did, there's like peer mediation where it's no like adults, it's all just peers, and basically they hold it confidential to you, so like they don't spread it or anything like that. You can just go in and talk to them, and then but if something serious, they can go and report it. But other than that, it's all confidential, and I think that's a really good way for schools to actually like implement good like mental health system for you to actually get your stuff out and not be afraid to actually voice your opinion about stuff or voice your thoughts about anything that you have going on. So I think that's a good resource.
Thank you for that, Amir. Christian?
I think that if they made it more like widespread that it's okay to talk about amongst the peers and stuff like that, if they just told people and taught people that it's okay to talk about, it'd be a little bit better because it'd be more widespread. It'd be easier to show your emotions. So if they just taught that, like kind of on a basis, all right, you can talk about your health. Don't go too crazy about the specifics or anything like that. Just generally talk about how you feel, and it'll be all right. So that can be a custom that can be made.
So Asia, I would like to interject right here. And I think that one thing schools can do is in health classes, when they start their curriculum, they can actually have modules on mental health to like have conversations about what mental health is, what it isn't, and to kind of make it normalized, even for young people, even while they're in school, that it's okay to have those conversations around mental health and about mental health. And I think that would also help us in the family structure, because I think Kayla's last question kind of made me think about how many times have we gone to the family picnic or the family cookout, and there's that one uncle or cousin that folk be like, well, just leave him alone, don't say too much to him. They didn't let us know that there was a mental issue happening. They just kind of taught us to kind of avoid it. And I think kind of having those conversations are critical, both in the home and in the school community.
Kayla, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I just wanted to go back to what Dr. Q was talking about as far as schools and curriculum. I took a whole health and gym class. I did basketball. I did soccer. They made me run. I like doing none of those things, and I'll never do it again. I promise you I won't. But we never meditated. We never talked about self-care. We never talked about what to do when I'm at home and having suicidal thoughts. They provided us with hotlines that we could call. But as we've said, like there was a large focus in health classes on the physical aspect of health, and not much conversation about what it meant to be mentally healthy and what it meant to take care of your mind.
Go ahead, Cole. And then Jasmine. Jasmine, I'm sorry.
She had her hand up first. Oh, okay. We had a class in school. We had a class which is basically a growth mindset thing. It was kind of instead of being a full out class, it was rather a subclass, which people didn't really take it seriously or take it as a class should have been. It was just a subclass, and even though it told you how to cope well and think positively and think in a way that you can actually grow and improve on things, people just took it as a subclass and kind of just like, oh, well, time to go to this class and basically write out a few things and then just class is over. That's it. You don't really learn much from it because it's just not forced as a class. It's just subclass. So I feel like that they should really just enforce it as an actual class rather than, something that just comes around. It's just like, you kind of just sigh, oh, we have to do this instead of, whatever we're trying to do right now because I clearly have a test I need to try to actually study for, but no, we have this. It just seems like a chore rather than an actual class. That's what I have.
Yeah, and that just makes me think about like some of the things that schools do well that we might not even think about as mental health, like school lunches and breakfasts, or in some cases having social workers, and things like gym class, like that's kind of related to having good mental health. And then at the same time, just hearing on this call, like in some schools, tools for coping like mindfulness and stuff is incorporated, whereas in other schools it's not. So that's something I think schools could really improve on. Also, like better support, especially as people are graduating, with like next steps, because oftentimes people are complaining about how their counselor wasn't that helpful, and that makes it much more stressful. And so in addition to having tools to cope, just upstream, in some cases better services. And then one thing that I think is kind of neat, since like kids who are queer are going to have more concerns as far as mental health. Just looking at the literature, like some schools have things like gay straight alliances and stuff like that, so that it's kind of a peer-to-peer support for mental health. I think those are some neat things.
Devontae, I saw that you raised your hand, so you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree with you, Cole, because we was in the same class. We went to the same school, and I personally love the growth mindset and the fixed mindset thing that they were doing. But a lot of people did not take it serious in our class, and it was like, "What are you doing?" It was really weird. I feel like they should have really enforced it, But yeah, it just needs to be forced. Just like they force everything else, they need to force this.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I like the class. It just wasn't important.
Now, I wanted to back around to what Dr. Key said in the health class, because in my health class, I took it as a senior because as a freshman, I just didn't care that much. So my teacher made it a point to write her own curriculum inside of the curriculum that they made her teach. And so when we first got into class, we did our whole nutrition unit, and it took us about a month to get through, but she focused on every single aspect of nutrition, making sure that she let us know that she was somebody that we can go and talk to. And even if you didn't feel comfortable just walking up to her and saying something to her, she made it a point to like be able to know every student that she had, and that's 150 kids. She made it a point to be able to tell by their body language whether something was wrong with them or not. And I remember a few weeks into the semester, I was heavy course load, AP classes, just stressed out, not sleeping. And she just walked up to me one day. I was going to a whole nother class, and she was like, "Is everything okay? Like, you just don't seem like Asia. You don't seem like Asia from the first week of school. You like fourth week beat down Asia." And it really meant something to me that she was actually paying attention to how I was interacting with her in her classroom and interacting with my peers outside of her classroom. So if there's no more hands, we can move on to the next question, which is,
Cruz,
how do you...
His hand.
Cruz.
Oh, my bad, Cruz. Go ahead.
You're fine. I was going to sort of go where you went. There's a lot of things that happen, let's say like high school, for example, that are like intense stress almost. Like the way that they speak about things, they sometimes word them in ways that like help you recognize the weight of them. And so like the SAT, for example, they'll sit there and let you know that, this can help, alter your fate and when it comes to college and things like that. But they never really, with those same conversations, they never really say, okay, so this is what you can help do. Like they might say, oh, go home and eat so that you could take the test better, but not really because your mind will be in the right place, not because it's a good coping mechanism to get some sleep or something like that. And so while they're doing those things, I think what would help schools is if they sort of think more about how it impacts what they do say and what they do promote, and maybe like, shape it to more of a way that's understanding or potentially, aware in a way. So like maybe they'll, like I said, do some coping strategies and say, all right, you can try doing this when you get home if you're feeling a little bit stressed or something like that, and open up, counseling services, especially during that time. Because, sometimes during those, like, just we get back from a holiday, even if you wanted to use the resources, they're not really available. And so I think it's really, being more mindful is what will help schools the most.
Okay, if that's all the hands, then we can move on to the next question now, which is how can school, oh wait, wrong question. Sorry. How do you feel about therapy? Do you think it's necessary or useful?
Okay, well, oh, sorry. Okay,
You can go
so
ahead,
I'll
then
go
Cole,
ahead.
and then Jasmine.
All right. So I think therapy is important and necessary, but people need therapy in different ways. So if somebody was talking earlier about not having a support system or not thinking that they can confide in their friends or family or in other people like that, I think that is a good place to start, to go seek a third party for therapy, because like I said earlier, I do think it's important to say stuff out loud. Just like when we want something positive to happen, we speak things in existence. When you are going through something, you have to talk about it, like I said earlier, to figure out where you are. So if you have a good support system and you can talk about stuff with family, friends, significant other, whatever, you might not need a traditional therapist, but there's other ways to get to a place of mental health, like yoga or meditation or prayer, music, whatever else. So traditional therapy, I do think, is important, but not everybody are starting in the same place.
And I do see Selena's hand is up.
I feel like at first I felt like therapy was so unnecessary, but now that I've gotten older, I feel like everybody should have therapy. But the thing is, it's so expensive, and I feel like that should be taken in consideration because most people who don't have that kind of money suffer the most. And I feel like it should be like some kind of program like this one that can help people who really need help. And a lot of kids can't go to therapy because their parents not going to pay for it or take them.
Cole, you can go, and then Jasmine.
I do think that therapy is like as said, but like I think that it is a little expensive, but I mean not a little. It is expensive, which kind of resides to the fact that I think that we need more therapists in our world. But anyway, I do agree with everything. I do agree with that. I do feel like therapy is very necessary because not everyone has. Let's say that you're touching the stove a bunch of times and you were never told that it was hot or it's gonna burn. You kind of need someone to tell you that. It's kind of like certain ways to cope. Not everyone, it's not completely unlocked. And I think that having external help, like a therapist who's an expert at it, will help it make it easier to find other ways to cope and other ways to deal with the situations that you have.
And just thinking about like the importance of therapy, I love that Selena said like that it needs to be more accessible and that everyone should have therapy because everyone has mental health, and we shouldn't just feel like when we're at the point of a mental disorder, that's when we need to see a therapist. Like we need to make sure we see a therapist before we get to that point, before it's kind of out of control. And I would say it's also important, especially if like things are persistent or it's overwhelming, like the issues are really like I said, like out of control. And then I would say like sometimes therapy is useful. I would say in general, yes. And then kind of personally, I'll just share a little bit. Like I do have a therapist, and I remember my first therapist. I was actually in grad school, and I was like, yeah, I'm stressed out, super stressed out. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Not I don't know what I'm doing, but stressed out. And I was like, I want a Black woman therapist. Like that was important to me. And it turned out to not be a good fit. Like we had kind of differences in, I don't know, goals or ideologies or something, and it just wasn't a good fit. And I found myself deciding to just, chuck it up, like just push through grad school and then figure it out later, which is now. And I actually have a different therapist now who is also a Black woman, but I learned like it'll be more useful if I look at, okay, what do they specialize in? Being someone who, comes from a home where I had a lot of ACEs, a lot of stuff went on. So I wanted a therapist who knew how to work with people who are dealing with trauma, could focus on like the reparenting and, helping with the things that I specifically needed assistance with. And I found that was much more useful. Also making sure like if I'm a person who's open to medication, like I'm looking at the type of therapist that could prescribe medication versus if I'm not interested, but I need other things like, oh, is this like social work or a psychologist going to be a best fit? So it's like sometimes useful, but when you have a great fit.
Great.
I agree with everyone. Oh, you can go ahead, Doctor.
As we transition to the questions around the water crisis and COVID and the whole this whole revolution on racism, one thing that I really love about you all here from Flint is that the world don't realize that you guys have been living through several incidents that are heavily draining, depressing, stress. When we think about living through the mental health of the water crisis, and when we think about COVID-19, and when we think about, the unjust killings and this whole rise around, addressing racism, that's a lot of tension. And in Flint, we're compounded with three things because we have the water crisis. So I want to kind of put that prompt out there. I know Christian had his hand up and Selena has her hand up, and then Asia and Kayla can then kind of take us through the last couple of questions before we end the show.
Okay, Christian can go ahead and then Selena.
Mine's more of a generality of what everyone said. Everyone said some amazing things about therapy. It's just unfortunate that it's not, easily accessible. Professional help is needed in just about everything. It's always good to have a professional telling you how to do it. It's not a good fit for everybody. It's personal. Some things, like I never thought about getting one. I've been through the hardest of times because I just, I don't want to pay money or ask somebody to pay money for me to go talk about my problems all day. But other people do need that, and other people think they don't, but they would. So it just needs to be more accessible, which is going to be hard to do, or they can focus on finding ways that they can cope with themselves.
Selena?
I didn't have anything to say. I just forgot to put my hand down.
Well, then Cruz, and then we can move on.
I'm just going to quickly throw out that there are also some resources online, and that are more affordable and sometimes even free. And so I think we should also do your research if possible. Like how it's been stated a couple of times, not every type of therapy is for each person. I mean, and there's different types, and there's different types of professionals that work along with them. And it was like, it spans through different types of ways, like how traditional therapy is offered with just, counseling one-on-one, but there's also sound therapy that's supposed to help assist you in different ways as well. And so I think research is really what helps on this type of thing. You just try to find out what you think would fit you best and then try it. I mean, there's no harm in trying it if that's possible for you. That's basically all I have to say.
And Monisha put a comment in that therapy is therapeutic, and one thing about it, we don't have to worry about it being repeated because licensed therapists cannot repeat your information. Like that's a lawsuit, literally. And so that's a good place of confidentiality. And then as we transition, I just want to give a shout out to Monte Terry. He's one of our other interns. He's actually in the participant side. He didn't log in on the panelist side, but I just want everyone to give him a shout out because he didn't want to interrupt the show coming on to the panel. So, okay, we can transition now. Asia, go ahead.
Okay, now we're gonna tie in mental health and the things that are happening around us. So this first question is, how has the Flint water crisis affected mental health issues in this area? Kayla, and then Christian.
So I think the obvious effect as far as mental health goes is the impact of lead on the brains of all of the people who drank it or consumed it in one way or another, whether that be from cooking or whatever the case may be. So I think that's the obvious effect. But then on top of that, when you're in the midst of a crisis, and on top of that, the water prices are very high. And so your parents are dealing with the effects of having to pay that bill. And so there's the financial issues. And then on top of that, having to deal with the school systems that were already struggling, but were impacted even more so by the fact of the Flint water crisis. So I think there were so many underlying effects on top of just the simple fact that the lead contamination has a physical impact on the mind.
And just like what Kayla said, it's just a ton of things underlying the actual, physical aspects of what it does to your mind and stuff like that in your brain. Adding some, like the people who are trying to fight against it, they have to put another thing on top of things that they already have. They might be busy already, and they might not have the time or day or not want to do it at all, but they, it's what's right. So, and they got to constantly fight for water, probably, privileges. They got to constantly pay the bills, which are astronomical comparing to other places that don't have, issues with it at all. And they also have to deal with, like, if you're a mother or a parent, you have to deal with your child, knowing that you poison your child on accident, but it still messes with you. It gets onto you. I damaged my kid. You got to think about that all the time. It's horrible. I know my mom thinks about it all the time. It's just so many things about, it's just awful. And also not trusting your government, not trusting people. Like, oh, they did this to us and we're trying to hide it. That's great. So it's just all around an awful situation.
So I'm gonna go to Cole and then Cruz can talk.
No, actually, I don't have a point.
I agree with Christian so much, especially with the last point, because there was a lot of strains that were just on your everyday. Just the concept of, all right, my mom works all the time, and so we need to go to the water distribution center on this day, and I pick up water because if we don't get it, now we have to deal with, potentially drinking things that are poisonous, and it was like that for every week. It was just a small burden of, all right, we got to stock up some water, and I got to go to the garage every time we go through some water. And each time I did that, it was like a reminder that, like, these people did this to me and my community, and they, like you said, they tried to hide it from me. And when people acknowledge it, they don't really understand me either. And so, like, that type of thing, like, weighed on me. And I know it weighed on a lot of people around me as well.
I definitely agree. I don't know if any of you guys have encountered anybody out of state or out of the city since the Flint water crisis has started, but now that I'm like in college and I've moved out of the city, when I tell people where I'm from, they're like, "Is the water still bad?" And I'm like, "That's not the question you're supposed to ask." Like, I mean, yes, the water is still bad, but you don't want to know how I'm doing with the water or like anything else. You just want to know if it's still bad. You want to know if the people still poisoning me.
Another thing, Asia, again, as I travel across the country speaking at these conferences, people think it's over. People think everything is solved here. They think all pipes have been replaced when we know no in-home plumbing has been replaced. and only about half of the service lines have been replaced. And so it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. But when we think about the mental effect that that has had on the residents, having to turn to the state government for assistance on addressing, on recovering from it when it was the state government that caused it, it's like going to the person that beat you down to patch you up. You know what I'm saying? So it has a very negative mental health impact on so many.
So I see the hand of Christian, and then I also see Jasmine's hand. I'm gonna ask very politely that we keep these quite concise. We still have one more question we want to get to very quickly, and we are over time.
All right, real quick. It's just another strain on people to think, you know, these people did it for us for a quick buck, and they're supposed to help us, and they aren't, and they're hiding it still. It's been 6.5 over that years now, and people think it's all right because they said, let's replace like a couple pipes, you know, all better. The health that people have is just, you know, not important anymore.
Yep. In addition to the trust issues of just receiving crumbs as reparations, there's mental health concerns that come along with the health conditions like kidney disease. When you're dealing with this, you're in pain, like, and that's harming your mental health. The developmental disorders, like this is going to be related to behavioral concerns later on. And then for women who are of reproductive age, like some people lost children, and that's something. Even the potential infertility, like these are things that will have long-term mental health implications.
Absolutely. Those are definitely several impacts when we talk about mental, even more so than just the current mental effects, the long-lasting effects that this crisis will have on the community. So our last question of the night goes even deeper into the overlapping intersections of society and mental health, and it is, how do you think recent events in the world are affecting people's mental health? And so those recent events we're referring to are politics, racism, and COVID-19. So how do all of these things overlapping play into mental health and our thoughts right now? And once again, really quick, before I call on people, I just want to make sure that we're being concise, because we want to make sure that everybody that wants to speak can speak, and that we also respect people's times who are watching. So Christian, I believe I saw your hand first. You go.
It's hard for everybody because around the world things are going off. I mean, California's on fire, like what, the 17th time this year? Corona's killing people still. They're trying to say it's not. And now governmental things, you know, people are, you know, the truth's coming out about it, and what Trump said earlier, that's also a thing. It's hitting the mental of people. This 2020 has been so rough on just everybody that it's kind of hard not to have people that haven't been affected.
Does anyone else want to answer this question?
Selena's hand is up.
Oh, Selena, I'll go to you now.
I feel like it's making people scared, like what's going on with all the police brutality, and how the president just is openly racist sometimes, and how a lot of his supporters, it makes you scared. And you see all the Ku Klux Klan meetings, and it really makes you feel like you don't belong. It makes you feel out of place, and it makes you feel alone, you know, because it's like, and it makes you feel like you're unwanted because people don't like you just because you like 3 shades darker than them. But yeah, it does do something to your mind. It makes you like you can't do anything because you're Black. So
absolutely, I understand that. Cruz, go ahead.
I'll go quickly. I kind of said it last week. I'm expected to perform at the same way I was before all these things hit me. And that's a large stressor in the case that, you know, I got all these readings to do at school and all this homework. But at the same time, what's playing on my mind is, am I safe when I go outside? Not just, you know, socially because of my skin, but physically, because, is this air I'm breathing, is it going to harm me potentially because of COVID? And so then you sit with all these things that are sitting on top of you unresolved. Like, they can't just be fixed in one day. And you're expected to function in the same way that you did before all these things were impacting you. And so it's a large stressor. And I think people need to begin to acknowledge it more before it gets too out of hand, because I feel like if things continue the way they are, there's going to be like a massive amount of people just being like, yo, we got to push back on things. And things are going to slow down. And we won't be able to potentially return back to normalcy even slower, because people won't be able to deal with it. But yeah, that's quickly what I'll go over.
Cole, I see your hand. You go ahead.
I think this, when it comes to mental health, it's been kind of like worryless. Like, you just go to school and then you go back, but now you have to worry about every little thing that could happen. Like you could just get shot in the street just randomly, or you could just die from coronavirus, because just how crazy life is going on right now. And I don't really know how to put this, but I just don't like the fact that it's all just unjustified. Like, all this death is just completely unjustified just because one person was afraid of someone else's color, and think that it's a way to just give them self-esteem, because if you have no actual qualities or skills, talents, or anything, it's just as easy as that, just to, put a label on someone and boom, bam, look at that. They're apparently worse than me because they are this, they are that. And because of that, it sucks. I don't like the fact that, the sad fact that I don't have to deal with it and everyone else has to, because I'm freaking, look how pasty I am. And the fact that this is the reason why I'm not being made fun of sucks for other people, because it's just to think about that and just realize that that's an actual excuse to be better than someone sucks. It sucks. I don't like it.
That is so refreshing to hear you say, Cole, because so many young people, I think it's going to take for those older generations that have been literally immersed in racism to die off. And it's going to take allies and young people of this generation and younger to actually change this world. And it's good to hear that there is an understanding that the tone of a person's skin or their ethnicity does not equate the content of who that person is. So appreciate that.
Do we have anyone else who wanted to answer this question? Amir, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Okay, so quick thing on the government side of things. It's they're all older, 60s, high 60s, early 70s, Caucasian males that are running most of this country. And it's they've been emerged in this, they grew up at the time of civil rights and all the other type of stuff. So it's they already have a type of bias almost a little bit. Some of them do, not all. But it's just crazy. I had to add on what Dr. Key said. Say this.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else? I'm just double checking the chat. Selena, we already got to you. We're all good. All right, I'll turn it over to Dr. Key.
So I want to thank you all for joining us, all those of you in Facebook world and social media land, as well as those that are in our Zoom audience for our third talk show. We will have talk shows every other Friday at 6:30 p.m. and we're going to talk about real life issues and subjects. And the Flint Public Health Youth Academy will be designing these talk shows and inviting other youth from other groups to join us as panelists. So if you have young people out there that you would like to be a part of some of the things that we do, just hit us up on our Facebook, send us a message and we'll make that contact. Today's show was called Minding Your Mental, and Kayla had that wonderful idea to do this. And we were linked by one of the mentors for our academy, Ashley Vante, to Tawana Anderson. And so this is a resource for those who are listening that need other resources. Tawana Anderson has a website and an organization called mindyourmentalexperience.com. So it's MINDYA mental experience, no spaces.com. And it's an organization here in Flint, Michigan that really looks at mental wellness And she is a wonderful, experienced leader in mental health therapy and in basically coaching people throughout this. So you want to look her up. Again, it's Mind Ya Mental. So MINDYA mentalexperience.com. Reach out to Tawana Anderson, and her number is 810-513-7506. Again, 810-513-7506. And if ever we have local resources that we can share that match up with this show, we like to share them so that our listening audience can do follow-up. So again, thank you all so much. We'll see you here Friday after next at 6:30 with the Flint Public Health Youth Academy's talk show series, A Youth Perspective. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.